Welcome to today's podcast episode of The Trust Doctor, Restoring Trust and Enriching Significant Relationships. And today I have such a treat for all you Java lovers and even non-Java lovers out there. And rather than me share any information about this incredible man, leader, father, I want to just introduce Howard Behar to you, the former president of Starbucks, who revolutionized the way we drink and order our coffee. So welcome, Howard. Thank you so much for being a guest.
Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh. So Howard, I am struck by when I always try to find obscure things about people, although I think you're pretty much out there. I don't think you have any secrets. Yeah. But I was struck by, it sounds like you credit working in your parents' market store, I guess a grocery store in Seattle, right, with how you learned how to be a leader, run a consumer-oriented business. So tell me a little bit about that early influence, because I suspect you grew up in the store like most people did. So let's hear about that.
So, the store was my babysitter after school. I would go, come from home from school and go to the store. My dad was working. My mom was working there. And so I was there every day. And, you learn a lot by watching your parents. They don't have to say anything. You learn a lot by just watching what they do. And, probably one of the most significant experiences I had that I didn't recognize until much later in life was one day I was about maybe 8 or 9 years old, and my dad was ringing a customer up on the cash register. This was an old hand crank cash register, with the 10 buttons across, 10 buttons down, and he had charge accounts for everybody because they were not just our customers, they're our neighbors and our friends.
Sure.
So he had rung a customer up, and then he looked at me and said, "Howard, would you go get me some," I can't even remember now if it was bananas or strawberries. And I went back and got them and brought them up, and he put them in the bag, and the customer walked out the door. And I was old enough to recognize my dad hadn't rung those up on the cash register because you always waited for the bing,
Right.
And so I said, "Dad, you forgot to ring those up." And he just looked at me and said, Howard, not everything we do in life do we need to get paid for. And I happen to know these people love fresh fruit and they can't afford it right now. And, they're not just our customers, they're our neighbors and our friends. It's just my way of helping them out. But I never forgot those words. Not everything we do in life do we need to get paid for. And that kind of has influenced me my whole life, my whole business career, is that, sometimes you just do things because you want to, out of the kindness of your heart or somebody else's need, and you don't worry whether you get paid for it or not. And I don't mean just monetarily get paid for it, but I mean, emotionally getting paid for it. You do it because it's the right thing to do, and it makes you feel better. And so that lesson, took me on, and I carried that forward to Starbucks. As a matter of fact, that's how I got to Starbucks. I was interviewing with Howard Schultz, who was a CEO then, and he's come back.
By the way, Howard Schultz grew up in Starrett City in New York, not far from where I grew up. So
yeah, right.
That's Brooklyn or Queens, but I know the humble background from him, which seems like he never.
In Canarsie.
Yeah, I used to work at a clinic there. Yes.
So anyway, I said to Howard, before you make an offer, before I decide to join the company, I'd like to work in the company for a week. I want to do it. I'll do it for free. And here's what I'd like to do. I want to work in the stores for a few days. I'd like to work in the plant for a few days, and I'd like to work in the trucks for a few days. And I did that for a week. And after that first week, I had a pretty good feeling of what the company was like. And fortunately, Howard extended an offer for me to join the company, and kind of the rest was history.
So, excuse me. So it sounds like you were looking to see what the culture was.
Yeah, I want to know what the culture was, and I wanted to know, what the people were like and what the business was like, and whether or not what he said was true. And
so you were the undercover boss before you were the undercover boss.
Yeah, I wasn't even undercover. I was just I was looking to be to be a boss, so to speak, but I was just working side by side with everybody that was there. Yeah, it's true, though. That's kind of like it.
Now, I saw that you went to a community college.
Yes.
So we, everything about your servant leadership. There's so many aspects of who you are as a person that identifies and defines who you are as a leader, as a president of a company. That really was groundbreaking. How do you reconcile the way, like Starbucks is so unique? It's still a publicly traded company, right? So you still have the quarterly, right? Is it publicly traded, or you guys?
It's publicly traded.
So today, the way things are is, if you don't meet your numbers, you're out. And people absolutely talk the game that you talk. They talk about putting the employee first. They talk about, well, really the employee first, and then they'll take care of the customers. But they don't, in fact, live that way. Right. And you did. So how were you able to stay true to that? And honestly, I know people, I have friends whose kids have worked in Starbucks, working their way through high school and college, and they loved it. Because they did feel it wasn't the same as working for Dunkin' Donuts. Am I allowed to say that? Sure. It was very different. So how did you do that?
Well, there's no inherent conflict between producing results, between making money and treating people well. That's fiction, right? You can treat people well and still make a profit and make money. I used to operate under the philosophy, the goal isn't to maximize profit, the goal is to optimize. And that means that, there's lots of different constituencies that you serve. And so you have to serve all of them. And so optimization means that you're taking care of everybody. And, is it equal? No, not always, but how you treat people really has nothing to do with money. Kindness and love and caring have nothing to do with whether you're rich or poor. Mm-hmm. And great leaders in great organizations understand that, even when somebody doesn't live up to your expectations, you still treat them with respect and dignity. I used to say, you love them as much going out the door as you loved them coming in the door. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so that's just a way of living. Servant leadership is not a business principle, right? It's a life principle. It's the understanding that all of us are put on this earth to serve others. There's no role that any of us will play in our lives. It doesn't make any difference, doctor, lawyer, engineer, architect, fire chief, barista, nurse, doesn't make any difference. Podcaster, whatever you do, you're here to serve other human beings. And as long as you remember that and remember that you're there to put other people first, you'll get what you need out of life. It follows.
You say it, Howard, and it makes such perfect sense. However, that's the exception today to the rule. You hire people and you ask them how you can meet their needs, right? How you can help them, how you can help them optimize to, it's cliched, but be the best that they can be, and then they will bring their best selves. It sounds so simple, it's common sense, and yet it's so not practiced. So how did we lose our way?
Well, I don't know that we ever lost our way. I think we've been through cycles.
Okay.
Right? I mean, if you look at the early 1900s, the Chevrons and all the companies that were operating then, they were pretty greedy companies, and the leaders were pretty greedy. And then when we went through a cycle after the Second World War, unionization came in, and General Motors treated its people pretty well, paid them pretty well. Ford actually did, and so they found it's just we've gone through these cycles, and then we went through the 60s and the 70s and the 80s of greed. When I forget who the economist said, the sole purpose of a company is to make money. It's just not true.
Well, Jack Welch also drove that home too.
Yeah, and now we're back in this mode that we understand that's not the sole purpose of a company. We're here to provide jobs to help people grow as human beings, and in so doing, they help the organization. I think there's a lot of companies that practice servant leadership. They may not call it that, but they practice it. I can think of companies in my own backyard, Nordstrom, Costco, et cetera. And there's some that haven't been that way. And I'll give you an
In
example.
Nordstrom and Costco, it's interesting you mentioned those two, both of which I'm a fan of. They are known for incredible customer service.
Yeah.
They are absolute. You go into Nordstrom, you feel like you're the only person in the store. Costco, their whole philosophy, what is it? They charge only 15% above.
Yeah.
There's not greed at all. It is, you do feel that. That's interesting.
I feel it. I mean, we've had companies in the technology business that hadn't, Microsoft is a great example. It was kind of a harsh environment in the early days, and it stayed that way for a long time until basically leadership changed, and the guy that was there comes in and he changes the whole philosophy. And he says the single most important skill that any leader needs to have is empathy.
And you use the word empathy, right? Empathy is the ability to understand and feel what somebody else is feeling, even if you don't agree with them, just to be there and to hold them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
we're not talking here about murder.
No.
We're talking about how people behave for themselves. And if somebody breaks the law, they break the law. But we shouldn't create laws about how human beings act with themselves.
Well, then, because we come from a place of, this is the whole concept of what I deal with a lot, like with trust, right? In all relationships, there's more than one truth. Like if I have to be 100% right, that means you're 100% wrong. But most of life is gray. My truth is my truth. It doesn't have to be your truth.
It doesn't have to be your truth. People probably that are listening, they might listen to say, well, he's a liberal. I am not. Right? I am not. I used to think I was progressive, but in Seattle, I am totally conservative compared to the lot of the population.
See, everything is relative.
Everything is relative, right? I still believe all the same things I believe, but now I sit on based on a lot of the people in Seattle, I sit off to the conservative side. But I'm conservative about a lot of things. I just think the things that have to do with people, loving people for who they are, not who you want them to be.
Yeah, it's such a simple thing. It's amazing to me that people have a hard time with that. You are who you are, and I think you made the big differentiator, right? As long as you're not hurting others, it's your life to live.
Yeah, it's your life to live.
Your life to live. And what would you do? Well, I guess when you were leading Starbucks, people didn't have these conversations. But what would you do if you did have somebody that was so judgmental, so critical of others? Let's just take it as a leader. How did you lead that? Like, what did you do with that?
Well, it depends how they acted on it.
Mm-hmm.
Starbucks had room for everybody, but you had to live by our values, right? You had to live by our core values. Treat everybody with respect and dignity, et cetera, down the list. I don't remember the whole list anymore, but you had to live by those values. And if you couldn't do that, then you didn't have a place at Starbucks. You can have all these thoughts to yourself, all you want, but you still had to treat people with love, caring, and dignity. Even if you were anti-gay marriage, that you fine, but you couldn't be. That's not your job at Starbucks. You had to accept everybody. Right. Now, some people couldn't do that, and they didn't stay.
They would leave. They would opt out.
They would opt out, and that's usually what happens. But I just think that at the end of the day, if you want to have peace in the world, if you want to have a world that truly honors God, then you have to love people no matter where they come from.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I don't know how anyone could argue with that. So let me pivot for a moment, because culture comes into play with all of this as well. So you went to Japan, you led Starbucks. So that's such a different culture. I think they don't have the word no in Japanese. Is that correct? Do you speak Japanese?
No, they don't say no like that, but they have. Yeah.
So are you fluent in Japanese? Like, tell us about that.
Well, I was in Japan every month for 3 or 4 days every month. because we were opening stores over. It was our first big market outside the U.S. So I was in Japan a lot.
And now excuse me, traditionally, are the Japanese tea drinkers?
Well, they drink a lot of tea, but they actually drank a lot of coffee. They were the third largest coffee consuming country in the world when we opened there. I mean, that's why I chose it. We chose it. We thought it would work. But yeah, does Japan have different cultural norms? Yes, they do. But one of the things, there were hardly any women in senior management in companies.
You read my mind. I was just going to ask you about the women.
We said we're going to have women in senior management. Now, we had a partner in Japan. We didn't just have, it wasn't just us. We had a joint venture partner in Japan.
A Japanese company.
Japanese company. So they didn't have a lot of women in senior management. We kept saying, Starbucks, this is who we are. No matter where we go, we're going to have women in management. It took a while for us to get it, but we ended up having a president of Starbucks Japan that was a female, right? And who did a wonderful job, Deidre Wager, and is her name. So you know what I found? So I didn't, I was the one that pushed to go outside of North America. I developed the business plan. And so, after that experience, it was about 8 years that I ran the international business. And I came back from that experience saying, we're all the same. We eat different foods, right? We may practice different religions. We might have different skin colors, but we all want to love and be loved. We all want to be treated with respect and dignity. We all want to grow as human beings. We all want more for ourselves, for our families. And once you wipe away the stuff that doesn't matter, that's all that's left, right? Is caring for other people. And countries are different. Even countries like China or countries like Saudi Arabia. But you don't think that people in Saudi Arabia want to be loved?
So Howard, it's interesting you brought that up. So right before women got the right to drive, I went to Saudi Arabia. As far as I know, I'm one of the only American woman that gave a keynote address in front of a mixed gender audience on business leadership.
Yeah.
And it was a fascinating experience. The women are incredibly brilliant. Outside of Israel, the most educated women in the Middle East, right? Because of the scholarship. But what I found was, and I did so much speaking, and it really opened up so many doors for me in the States to consult and coach. But what I found is at the end of the day, we are so much more alike than we are different. And women in particular, we all want the same things.
Yeah.
We want to be loved. We want our families to be loved. We want to be safe. Yeah. It really was brilliant. It was, we went into the bathroom with the women that have the Nija, like everything with the only thing you could see is the eyes. And as an American, New Yorker, no less.
Right, yeah.
And we go to the bathroom, they take it off. I'm like, shame on me. Oh my gosh, it was wonderful. So what do I ask them? How do you do your eye makeup? Because their eye makeup is beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had so much fun. And it said, look, this is cultural. Don't get Americans, you guys get so caught up on, we take it. It's so great. And it was really interesting because it was the first business trip I took where I didn't have to worry about what I was wearing. Yeah. It was wonderful.
Well, it's true. I mean, that's it. And that's the way it was around the world. And they're all different.
But let me ask you, though, about having the woman, because this is true in the States as well. And maybe it's a dirty little secret and people don't like to talk about it. But for a woman, many women, even today, to be successful outside the home, there is still an element of, if they have a partner, if they have a traditional marriage, their husband being supportive of that. Whereas you don't think about men having a supportive wife for you to climb the corporate ladder in the same way as you do for that women do. Like women will say, I can't because my husband will be upset, or I need to be. It's actually mind blowing to me.
It's I hope that that's changing. That's not my life. I will tell you that.
But in Japan, but it's
changing.
Is it?
Changing.
But it wasn't back then. I mean, it must have been harder back when you did it.
It was hard, but we did it, and we just kept pushing it, and I kept talking about it, not sitting in judgment. I just kept talking about it and saying, we've got to do this. This is who we are. Look at our customers, And so over time it changes. It's not no place. It's not perfect. we're not going to be all the same. We're not going to agree on everything, but most things we do. One, in Kuwait, most of the retail clerks in Kuwait are Filipinos that they bring in, or other Asian countries, and very few of the in Kuwait the young people want to work in retail or in the stores. So we had, when we first opened there, we had women and young men and young women from Kuwait that wanted to work in the company and work behind the counter. It was unheard of at the time, and yet they did it. And so, we honored it, and yet I remember walking in a store one time after we first opened the store, and here were three women, full burqas with just the eyes, and what were they drinking? Lattes through a straw up underneath them, right? Talking as fast as they could. It was exactly the same thing that goes on in San Francisco or London or New York, right? Same thing, just no burqas, right? But same thing. And so, but this whole thing about women, I think that's changing. I mean, I know at Starbucks, there were more, we had more women that were the prime earners, right? A lot of women that were prime earners of senior leadership positions.
So I do want to ask you though, how did you know that you wanted to expand outside of North America? What was that like? Where was that vision?
I don't know. It's a great question. I'm trying to think back. Here's part of it. It was part of it was something I wanted to do. It was I wanted to do something different. I was reporting to Howard Schultz, and things were getting really good at Starbucks, and I was feeling like my air hose was getting stepped on a little bit, and I need freedom. What did you mean? I know what you mean when you say your air hose was getting stepped on, but tell me what you meant. People weren't letting you do what you want. It was becoming. Howard, things were starting to go good. Howard wanted more influence in a lot of areas that I had responsibility for. And, you
wanted to give him the Heisman. I know you're a football fan, so you wanted to give him the Heisman.
I want to give him the Heisman. Yeah, let me alone, and so, I thought that, what else could I do inside the company? And so I said, I could take Starbucks outside of North America. I've got the skills. I'd never run an international business, but I knew Starbucks and I wasn't afraid. And so I developed a business plan to do it. And I presented it to the board, and it took 2 years to get approval, but I did. And so that's how it happened. That's why it was more a desire on my part. It was a dream that I had to do it. And I wanted my freedom again. I wanted space again.
All right. So where we know all about the servant leadership, where does that fearlessness come from? Because you are fearless.
I am not fearless. I have fears. I have just all the same fears other people have.
From the business perspective, from a leadership.
I don't know. I always never felt I needed a job. I always believed that, that you got to be fearless in your job. You got to be willing to give up your job every day. And that means that you got to be able to
risk
and take risks, sometimes from just speaking your mind. And I was always a risk taker. I was not afraid of doing things that I thought were right. And so, that was just, I grew up in that. When you grow up in small businesses, that's what you see all around you. I had aunts and all, they were all immigrants. They were all in small business. That's what I saw: jewelry stores, pawnbrokers, music stores, grocery stores, bagel makers, tailors, and I watched them all make livings. And so, that's kind of where it came from.
What do you think about clearly you're not money driven. Yet here you are. What do you think about that? Are you like, what do I need this for? Like,
I mean, it wasn't, when I had money, I spent it. When I didn't have money, I didn't. I'd save. There was a guy that when I was young, my first management job, and his name was Sid Sheckman. He said, Howard, pay yourself first. He says, take 10% of your paycheck, put it away. And
I bet your dad didn't say that, though.
No, my dad didn't tell me, no.
Right, yeah.
This was my boss telling me that, and I did that. And so that started the journey. But I was never really driven by money. As long as I had enough to, put food on the table, and I always believed I could do that. I was not afraid of working. I've been working since I was 13, so I'm not afraid of work. I like work. I like people, and I pick up cigarette butts when nobody else will bend over, and that was part of how I lived my life. So, I've been with a couple of companies that, one of the companies, I invested all of my savings in it and lost it all. And Starbucks, I didn't know Starbucks was going to become what it became. I was trying to escape corporate life. I always wanted to do something that was fun. I always found if I filled my soul, right, and that everything else would work out. And it did. Now, I'm lucky. I'm under no illusion, right? Now I believe luck is where opportunity meets preparation. And the opportunity came along and I was prepared, but I was lucky. I mean, who the hell would know that Starbucks would become a multi-billion-dollar company operating in 97 countries? If I'd have known, I'd have kept all my stock. So I didn't know. I was just doing what I wanted to do. And after that week of working there for free, I said, this is my place. And I was prepared and I had good skills and I was willing to risk my job. I mean, Howard and I would get in some blowouts. I mean, really blowouts.
I didn't know this about the two of you. I want to interview Howard Schultz. Tell him another kid from Brooklyn wants to interview
any other guy would have fired me, True.
So what does that say? What did that say? What does that say about Howard Schultz?
He was a street fighter, and he was.
He wanted a good fight. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I was one of the few people that he'd put up with it. I think timing had a lot to do with it. I had lots of support inside the company because I was a people guy and people knew it. And so the guy that pushed me to come in the company, I used to go to him and say, I'm out of here. I can't stand this anymore. And he said, Howard, calm down. And there was a third leg to this stool, a guy named Orrin Smith. And it was the three of us together that really built the company. Orrin was the peacemaker. When Howard and I were going at each other, he'd just look at us and say, hey, boys, calm down, And we'd meet every Monday night for dinner or conversation about the company. And so we just found a way. But you have to be fearless as best as you can about losing your job. I had fears. I had other fears. I had my own insecurities about I wasn't good enough. I didn't have a college degree. It took me a long time to overcome that. And I practiced affirmations as skills to get over a lot of that stuff. And so, I don't know. It was just a lot of things came together at the right time and I got lucky. And sometimes, a lot of people work hard.
Oh, sure.
And never get the opportunity that I got, never earned what I earned. But, you just got to be prepared to take a risk sometimes. And I understood that I had to work in entrepreneurial organizations. No college degree. I had to take chances other people wouldn't take. And I did that. And I liked it.
Well, that's the value of coming in from not knowing the industry or from a different industry, because there's no sense of, well, that's not how we do it. That won't work around here. You're like, why not?
Yeah, well, that's right. I was always, why not? If it's not illegal, immoral, unethical, and you don't poison somebody, try it.
And you don't poison somebody.
Yeah.
So if you could, do you ever think, selling your stock notwithstanding, do you ever think of, if I could have done something differently in my career, what would it have been?
I would have taken the risk to do my own business. I would
tell me more about that.
That I would have stepped up earlier and before I went to Starbucks, I was trying to buy a business. It's actually how I got there, because I was trying to buy a franchise business, and the guy that had franchises was also helping Howard Schultz. And I went to pitch this guy. My brother-in-law was going to loan me money, and my brother-in-law knew this guy as well. His name was Jack Rogers. And I went there to pitch my idea. And he said, what do you want to do something like that for? We need a guy like you right here at Starbucks. And, you could have heard my brother-in-law's sigh of relief all the way to California from Seattle. He wouldn't have to loan me any money. So that's how to
this day, he's grateful to Jack.
I was trying to buy companies. I'd looked at all sorts of companies to buy. And and so I wanted to run my own business, and I just never took the chance, and I didn't do it. And so I went to work for Starbucks, and I treated it like it was my own business. It was as much my business as it was Howard Schultz's.
Maybe that's why you were fighting so much with Howard, because you did have that passion as if it was
passion. I cared, and he cared. We both knew each other, cared. We both loved each other, and he's a mensch. He's a great guy. He would do anything for you. If you were hurting, if you had a problem, he would be there for you. And so
I think people would say that about you too, Howard.
Yeah. So, it's just life, you live your life. And so that's what I would have done.
Okay. So let me ask you another question now, another little pivot here, if you don't mind. So how many children do you have?
I have 2 children and 6 grandchildren.
Okay. That's the best blessing, right?
Yeah.
So how did you live your values, be a servant leader as a parent, working so hard, traveling so much? That I know balance gets a bad rap, but as working professionals, we're trying to do it all, and we have to because we do it. But why are you smiling? What did I say?
Well, because I'm not a good example to ask that question. I worked hard, and I worked a lot, but I did some things. We would have family planning sessions where we talk about our goals in our family. We talk about our values. And I would take my kids on business trips with me so they could see what I was doing. And I would have them in the meetings.
At what ages?
They were young. They were probably 12 and 8.
So they're sponges at that point.
Huh?
They're sponges at that point.
Yeah, they were sponges. And then they had it. When I was gone, they knew where I was. And, I was gone a lot, particularly at Starbucks. I was traveled 70% of the time.
Oh, wow.
Now, Lynn was my wife was getting her PhD at the time. And so we had to figure out how to work it out. And we worked it out, but I did live up to every commitment I ever made to them, everyone. And I treated them respectfully. I was never judgmental of my kids, ever.
So what was Lynn's role in your success besides the obvious?
Lynn, I started out trying to be a Jewish husband. I'm the guy. I support the family. I do everything, right? And Lynn wasn't Jewish when she converted before we got married, but Lynn was independent. Well, Lynn was a second marriage. We've been married 45 years. And
second marriage for both of you, or just for her?
For both of us. And we each brought a child into the marriage. And so, but Lynn was independent, and I struggled with that. She wanted her own checkbook. She wanted her own bank accounts. She wanted her own stuff, and we had to work through that, and I had to work through it, and I had to let go. And so you asked me what role she played. She set me free because I had to honor what she wanted. In so doing, I realized that what I was honoring with her, she was honoring with me. She never said, Howard, I don't want you to do that, ever. She said, well, she'd ask questions, but she always was supportive, and she was always there. But yet she was having her own career. She was an oncology social worker, and she ended up getting her PhD. She didn't have a college degree when we got married. I asked her, I said, what would you like to do with your life? That was a question I asked her. She said, I'd like to go back to school. I said, okay, let's figure it out. And 11 years she spent in school. I said to her dad one day, I said, I wasn't supposed to have to pay for all that. You're the dad. But, she did.
He said, joke's on you.
She was always supportive of me, and I was always supportive of her. And that made a difference.
And do your children all live nearby where you get
They both live in Seattle. Yeah.
And you get to see them a lot?
To see my grandkids a lot, my children a lot. Just got back from a trip to Hawaii with one of my grandchildren. When they turn 13, we take them on a trip anywhere in the United States they want to go. One chose Mexico. I said, that's not the United States, but we'll do it.
Now, why anywhere in the United States? Why that caveat?
Well, I didn't want to end up in a deal where one wanted to go to Europe for 2 weeks. I wanted to make it within some semblance of, I could keep the costs under control.
Sanity, yeah.
Sanity, and that we could do it in 5 days,
Oh, okay, great. Okay,
So two have been to New York. There's a third one want to go to New York. Two have been to Hawaii. One is going to Mexico. Went to Mexico.
So that's that's six. I was just doing the math. Great. When you came to New York, where did you stay? What did you do?
We went to plays 5 nights. We ate at great restaurants. We ate at all the little neighborhood restaurants. We had a ball.
Awesome. Well, people tease me all the time when, of course, I open up my mouth and they say, "Where are you from?" And my answer is the center of the universe.
Yeah, right.
And sometimes they say Chicago. I'm like, what? San Francisco, like, what? I said, not only New York, but Brooklyn. I said, if you shake anybody's family tree hard enough, somebody from Brooklyn will.
Somebody's come from Brooklyn. What I was going to, I had never been to Canarsie, and so I knew Howard was raised in Canarsie.
Oh, it's very different now than when Howard grew up there, but yeah.
So I hired a car and driver, and he said, "You want to go where?" Now, when I went there, the 7-Eleven had a drawer you shoved out. You didn't go into the 7-Eleven. They shoved out the drawer. They said, "What do you want?" They went and get it.
Money in.
Yeah, right. And so on the way to Canarsie, we stopped in Brooklyn and we went to a kosher restaurant. Mm-hmm. And this was straight kosher. I'd never been to it.
Culture shock for the kids, right?
Shock. But it was delicious, let me tell you.
I'm glad that you took them, and you should, if you come back again, you have to let me know. But did you get to Coney Island? Because where I grew up, when Howard grew up, you took your life in your hands going to Coney Island. Yeah. Now it's the place to go. You have the cyclone.
Yeah.
It's great. All right. This was amazing. I feel like I've known you my whole life, quite honestly. 2 more quick questions. Yeah. 2 more, if I may. Yeah. What is the one main thing you've learned about life that you want the listeners to know?
That if you don't know where you're going, any path will get you there. Write your goals down, write a plan for your life, have your mission statement written down, have your values written down, and a paragraph about how you want to live your life. You can change it anytime you want. Write it in pencil, but have a plan. Don't just float through life.
Be the author of your own life.
Be the author of your life. That would be what I would say.
Okay, and then the last question is, what's the last book you reread and why?
The Boys in the Boat.
Okay, I love that, but why?
Because The Boys in the Boat was about young people that came from nothing, right? That had a dream. They worked hard together. They had a coach that cared about them, a boat builder that was an expert in what he did, and they achieved a result that nobody ever thought they could. They won the 1936 Olympics in Nazi Germany.
Yeah, that was a great story. Do you remember the author if the listeners want to check it out?
His last name is Brown. I can't remember his first name.
Okay. All right. So how can people learn more about you? Where would you like to send them? I know
I give everybody my email address and my cell phone number. So here's my email address.
All right. I'm taking it down.
It's hb@howardbehar.com. That's my initials, hb@howardbehar.com. And my cell phone number is 206-972-7776. I will answer anybody. It may take me a while. I'm a little slow now, but I'll get back to everybody.
So what's behind giving everybody your personal info?
Nurture and inspire the human spirit. If I can help another person, and my job is to serve others, then if somebody wants to ask a question or they just want to talk to somebody. I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm not a counselor, but I just think that's my responsibility as a human being to help other people. And so, sometimes there's a lot of people call, sometimes a few people call,
So we're all here for a purpose, and you absolutely live that life. So thank you so much, Howard. This was awesome. And that concludes today's podcast episode of The Trust Doctor, Restoring Trust and Enriching Significant Relationships. And now there's no secrets. You have Howard's email. You have his cell phone number. And since I know you loved this podcast, make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. Until next time, be well.
Once again, we've concluded another great episode of The Trust Doctor with Dr. Patty Ann. Tune in next week for more insights and advice on how you can create, nurture, and sustain healthy relationships. To find out more about the podcast, visit drpattyann.com/podcast. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, and share. Until next time.